Good evening, all. I want to say good evening to all who are here in the sanctuary. Good evening to our speakers tonight, and good evening to the 50 or some folks on Zoom already. We're glad you're here. We're glad that you're joining us for tonight's Justice Jam focused on alternatives to incarceration in Alameda County. My name is Pastor Allison Tanner. I am the pastor of Public Witness here at Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church. I'm in my 23rd year of pastoring here. And I'm the one who coordinates Lakeshore's Justice Jams, which are, well, pre-COVID they were quarterly. Now they take place as frequently as we can pull them together. But I organize Justice Jams, which are community events that promote understanding of pressing social concerns and what the community is doing and can do in response. We've done a number of them over the years, and if you have any interest in it, hearing about any of the other topics we've done, seeing recordings, or showing up for future Justice Jams, make sure I have your information so that I can let you know. Tonight, though, we are excited to talk about alternatives to incarceration, and I want to take just a minute to highlight the hosting organizations in addition to Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church. We have Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity represented here. We have Faith in Action East Bay represented. I know on Zoom we have the Interfaith Coalition for Justice in Our Jails, and Richard was in the back greeting folks from there. And then with our speakers, we also have the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy, and we have BOSS Building Opportunities for Self-Sufficiency. These orgs have all come together in recognition that we're all working toward a safer and more just and fair Alameda County, and that when we pool our resources, we can do so much more together. So I want to thank the planning team and the orgs sponsoring it. A few words of logistics. Tonight's discussion will be recorded, and you will have access to the recording if you've registered for the event. And if you're online, we know that you've registered. If you haven't had a chance to register and you're in person, I encourage you to do so. And the link is on the flyer in the back, just so that following tonight's program, we will send out electronic copies of all the materials that will be shared tonight and further resources from our organizations. We are practicing safe COVID practices, so we ask that unless you are speaking on the panel, that you keep your masks on and maintain social distancing. There are bathrooms available in the open room. The men's bathroom is to my left, your right, and the women's bathroom is to in the hallway on your left, my right. One final thing I want to say is that hopefully when you came in, you were given a piece of scratch paper. This is our low-tech version of a note card, but there will be time tonight for Q&A, and even as the speakers are presenting, if there are questions that come up that you would like them to address, use this, and Richard or Dave Robinson, we're going to make you run questions. Simply put your hand in the air and the questions will come up to me, or when we move to Q&A, there'll be a time for you to bring them up as well. So we've come together to talk about alternatives to incarceration. And I wanted to provide a few brief framing marks before we engage in this discussion. The first is that we are all very aware that it is easy to talk about what is wrong with policing and the criminal legal system in Alameda County. It's much harder to say, I want to be part of the solution. How can we think about what needs done, and how can we work to bring those ideas into our community? And tonight, we will have some of that harder conversation to highlight some, not only of the much needed work that we long to see, but also some of the much needed work that is currently taking place. And there'll be ways for us to think about how we as a community can participate in the work of reimagining and reestablishing justice in Alameda County, but a justice that is fair, equitable, a justice that addresses the vast economic and racial injustices that our current policing and criminal legal system were created to reproduce. And so tonight, by way of having this hard conversation, I also have every expectation that it will be a hopeful conversation, because we are community coming together to pool our resources and say something better must be done in our county, something better can be done, is being done, and we will work together so that more can be done. A word about who we are, and I recognize as you look around, we're a smallish crowd, but actually we represent about 1/4 of the folks who are in attendance tonight. We had over 150 people registered, 75% of which chose to watch on Zoom. So you too in the Zoom world are part of our community tonight. We registered were a total of over 31 organizations, congregations, faith communities, and interfaith groups that said this is a conversation we want to be a part of. In this conversation, we have community members, community leaders, public officials, taxpayers, systems-impacted individuals, families, friends, and loved ones. In this group, we have people of faith and people of conscience who believe that more must be done to provide justice, accountability, compassion, and humanity toward every person in our community. And in this discussion, we have abolitionists, we have reformers, we have people seeking information and people seeking ways to engage in creating a just community that provides for each and every member to thrive, to find healing, and to make amends for mistakes. We're here because there's important work to be done, and together we are committed to doing this work. Because the primary orgs, both in planning and representing the attendance, come from the interfaith community, I want to take just a few minutes to frame an understanding of justice that is informed by morality before we have this conversation. And I say this as the pastor of this church, I say this as an interfaith leader in the community, and I say this as a former ethics instructor at Holy Names University. I want us to remember when we talk tonight about justice, one, that justice is relational. It's never simply about an individual who broke a law, but about all of us and what commitments we owe to one another so we can live together in a way that affirms the well-being of each and thus all. Justice is about how we as a community commit to live together and what we need to do as a community to restore community, not only when people are harmed, but especially when the criminal legal system itself causes harm in our community. Justice requires we step in and we do something. And justice offers 4 basic demands that I want us to keep in mind tonight. Justice demands that we see one another as human beings and reject all attempts to dehumanize or criminalize any member of our community. We need to acknowledge that every person has humanity and dignity, no matter what they may or may not have done, and no one deserves condemnation. Justice demands that we allow compassion to influence our thinking. Compassion for people who have made mistakes, compassion for people who have been mistreated, compassion for people in need of assistance, compassion for people who lack resources, compassion for people who need to make amends. Third, justice demands accountability rather than punishment. It acknowledges that there are harms done to people by systems, as well as individuals who have caused harm to one another, and we need to hold accountable not just individuals, but even more importantly, the systems and structures in our society that are impacting particularly the vulnerable in our midst. And finally, justice demands opportunities for healing and repair, both for those who have caused harm and those who have participated in structures that cause harm, opportunities for healing and repair for individuals and for our community. And so finally, as we reimagine justice tonight in our community, simply to summarize, we want to look at justice in ways that promote dignity and humanity instead of criminalization, ways that promote accountability rather than punishment, ways that promote restorative justice rather than retributive justice, compassion over condemnation, and opportunities for redemption, and the resources needed for this to become a reality. I'm so glad you're going to be part of the conversation tonight. I want to introduce our first speaker and invite you to begin the slow trek of making it up here, but for our keynote tonight, we are very pleased to present Wendy Still, Public Safety Advisor to Alameda County. In the brochure handed out or put as a link in the Zoom, you will have her full bio, but let me just note that Wendy has spent several decades working for justice and humanity in the criminal legal system, including the development and implementation of innovative justice alternatives and reentry programs. Wendy, we're pleased to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm so short. Thank you very much, Pastor Tanner. I feel very fortunate to be with you here tonight and on the screen. I would also like to thank all the hosting organization partners for having this Justice Jam. I've spent the last roughly 40 years of my life involved in criminal justice reform. And when it wasn't popular to be speaking out against what I saw inside the prison system for about 30 years, and then when I went out to community-based supervision or probation to reform two systems, 5 years in San Francisco and 5 years in Alameda. I tell you that to say that reform is not for the weak of heart. There has to be a commitment. And with that commitment, though, wonderful change can happen. We're going to talk about alternatives to incarceration, but really what it's about tonight is promoting a different type of community safety. Our criminal justice system should keep us safe, it should treat people fairly and respectfully, and be flexible and ready to change with the times. However, our justice systems in California and across the nation are outdated, they drain resources and disrupt communities. Our prisons are too big, are too full, and our criminal justice policies have been overly punitive and have created incentives that promote inefficiency within the system, systemic racial discrimination, and end up with high levels of incarceration and broken families. To truly transform justice systems, and notice I don't use the word reform, I talk about transformation because that's what's needed. Communities should be prioritized over incarceration, and this not by words of politicians, but by funding strategies. You know, you can tell what the priorities are of a given community or state, whether it's state leadership, local leadership, is by where money is basically authorized to. Criminal justice policies should incentivize the reduction of the incarceration rate. They should work to eliminate racial discrimination and aim to heal communities that have been harmed by high rates of incarceration through the incorporation of restorative justice practices and the creation of community healing spaces. not rocket science. You know, what we're really talking about is rehumanizing a system that has historically been focused on failure and incarceration. That's really what our justice system has been focused on, a lot of the strategies, and that's why we saw our prisons just grow and so many families destroyed over these justice policies that so disparately impacted individuals of color and individuals that lived in communities that were not invested in by the government. But now we're at a historic moment in time when the public is demanding change. They're demanding, in fact, a return on their investment, and that is not jail. It's safety, but safety delivered in a much different way. We must reframe our thinking about justice and rehabilitation, and the change must be system-focused on success rather than a system focused on failure. We need to prevent rather than to respond, and resources must be reallocated to align with community support and values. Mass incarceration has been an investment in failure. If the justice system, including jails and prisons, were a business, it would have been bankrupt a long time ago. These are things that you all know. But now, in today, our system should be built on, and accountability should look like restoration and rehabilitation rather than incarceration. So, what can we do? How do we change that dynamic? Well, today, or actually yesterday, Alameda County's jail population was 2,239. So far, the alternatives that we use within our community that have been approved by the courts, by the district attorney, public defender, that we've signed on to, is in the last few years, the board has eliminated fines, typical fines charged through the public defender, charged through probation, and charged through also the sheriffs for alternative work programs. That's a good step in the right direction. Restitution in lieu of incarceration also are used as alternatives. Community service, probation, house arrest, inpatient drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs, inpatient psychiatric treatment, work release, drug, mental health violation, and other courts focused on services. These are strategies that we need to use as a base and we need to build upon. We need to invest in prevention so that an individual does not have to go to jail to receive the mental health services or behavioral health services that they need. And with that, I want to highlight a program that the district attorney, Nancy O'Malley, has created, and I see a couple of talented staff here in the audience too, but it's called CARES, and it's a partnership between the DA and between La Familia, a community-based organization. And what the program does is it provides an alternative before anyone gets to incarceration. Something happens in the community, an individual is at risk of being arrested, but now the police have an alternative to, instead of taking that individual to jail and going through the whole very expensive booking and all that process, maybe to be released on pretrial or not, the individual police officers can take this individual that has some kind of justice involvement to the CARES, receives wraparound services, which may include mental health services, referral to behavioral health, or other housing and services that are needed. And that this is a program that is proving to be very effective. And why? Because it's giving the police a different alternative rather than having to take that individual to jail. And that's what reimagining justice looks like. Now, the only problem is there's only one of the CARES facility in the entire county, and there are many jails in all parts of the county. And so one of the things that would be helpful and reduce the jail population, which is what we're here to talk about, is to create additional CARES programs in other areas of the county. I know that that suggestion has been raised to the board. I know the board is very interested in that. I would not at all be surprised to see that funded in this upcoming budget. But that's just one type of program. There are a lot of barriers that individuals face that have justice involvement, and barriers are beginning to be removed by the legislature. Probation supervision terms are being shortened. Also, resources are now available for those that have been justice involved that historically individuals have been barred from accessing a lot of public resources. But now the legislature, realizing just how expensive and what a failure the existing system is beginning to make those huge investments. And this budget cycle, they've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in strategies to expand behavioral health funding to local communities, which is what we are, for mental health and substance use disorder programs. CalAIM also, which is, CalAIM used to be the Medi-Cal, now people refer to it as CalAIM, but this year, actually, the county has a requirement, like all the rest of the counties, to create a plan for investing for those that are justice involved in reentry, and resources that are there for individuals to receive wraparound services, housing for a period of time. And so what all of the various organizations can do is to be very involved in how are these programs created? How is our plan as a county that will have to go to the state for approval, how are those resources being invested upon? The housing, housing for those that have justice involvement. Historically, there's been a lot of discriminatory practices for those that have justice involvement, and the laws have changed around that. But we need to ensure that there are more housing projects that are started. One really creative program that was created back when I was chief of probation, we partnered with a church in the local community, and the church had property, and it wanted to basically create housing for those that had justice involvement. We partnered with them. We paid for the rehabilitation of the apartments that were there, built on site, the renovation of that, and now there is housing that is dedicated. And so that is one way that faith-based organizations can look differently at opportunities to partner with different agencies that they may not have partnered with before, whether it be the health agency, whether it be behavioral health, whether it be social services, probation, or the district attorney or others, and to create these programs that basically benefit all those that we are trying to serve. Our Board of Supervisors invests over about $30 million annually in programs to support those that are adults and justice involved, and about $7 million for justice involved youth to support them. And as part of the program tonight, I think in the chat, and there's going to be an email out to all of those that are in attendance, of 8 pages of funded programs to support our reentry services for those that are justice involved. And that doesn't just mean individuals that are on probation. It's those that have justice involvement defined very broadly, so that everything from housing to employment to training programs, vocational programs, and mental health programs, and various types of housing, all the services that an individual needs. And they don't necessarily have to be away for a long time as a returning citizen. Their life could be disrupted because they've been to jail, but they still need help with all those wraparound services. So one important way is to familiarize yourself with those programs, get involved, volunteer, or also help educate those that may need those type of services to connect to those services. We need to promote community safety through alternatives to incarceration, and that's utilizing all of the different venues that are available. The community, all your organization, all the individuals that are participating tonight are participating because you passionately care about changing the way the system works and changing the system to where we're supporting, we're rehumanizing our justice system, we're rehumanizing our justice policies, and we are investing in human capital versus incarceration beds. There are other alternatives, such as community restoration boards that can be created, where an individual who's committed a crime can go before a community board which focuses on restoration. The individual can accept the restoration agreement, complete it, and have no conviction on his or her record. The DA's office is a key partner in the creation of this type of program. There are already some programs in various ways that exist, but the programs can be expanded upon and basically created throughout communities across the county. Also, the 8-page listing of programs that I referenced can also provide alternatives, whether it's through court-expanded programs, alternatives, or participating in the behavioral health, mental health, or other programs designed to change the trajectory of an individual's life, help get the word out. Faith-based communities have wonderful partnerships and leverage the individuals, whether they're associated with your faith-based program or whether you're associated with one of the community-based programs. Partnerships are really the collaborations, what we're seeing that work out very effectively, where the skill set or the specific expertise that one entity has is shared with another entity to create a partnership that is very strong and that builds on the strength of those programs. Another way, though, is to have your voice heard. And I will say, Alameda County, I've been in communities literally across the nation, and I am very proud to be associated with Alameda County. Alameda County has been progressive. It doesn't mean that we're done, but it has been very progressive. The board has been very open to basically being a first at eliminating fines, so to speak, a first at funding some of these strategies that are programs that were as an idea or a concept that actually work. And so utilize your voice of your various organizations to get involved. There's the CARES First, Jails Last initiative, that basically it's a 21-member panel board, and these are volunteers. Those are volunteers, they're government employees, they're partnership with the whole goal of basically creating a system where care is the first stop, not jails. Also, there's a community advisory board that each board member appoints 3 individuals from each one of the districts that basically oversees roughly and advises on about $25 million worth of funding for programs. Get involved, apply for one of those board appointments. AB 1185 is a program, is actually legislation that I'm working on right now, a proposal to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation whether we should, as a county, create a Sheriff's Oversight Board or an Inspector General, or both. There are public hearings that go on. The board has the Public Protection Committee where they are attuned and want to hear from the community. Let your voice be heard. Also, the Mental Health Services Advisory Board. There are seats that are available on there. They are also, any program to be successful has to be created with the voices of those that are impacted, whether it's the justice-involved individual or whether it's their family member. And including those voices and whatever strategies are designed or whatever board or program is created is critical to have it, 1, be realistic, and 2, to have it be effective. And also building trust. within the community. And I think that's what AB 1185 is a really good example of, is there has never been oversight, and this is across California, of any sheriff's department. And the legislature has said everybody should be every body should be transparent, every organization. And so this is one that I do urge you to stay tuned into. There is a hearing, Public Protection Committee, on the 17th of March, where we will talk about the different types of models and ask the board to make some specific decisions, points, so that we can come back with a full proposal. But lastly, I just want to talk 1 minute, I think that's what I have, about reimagining adult justice. Is another board initiative that's out there that has the opportunity to be involved in. There'll be community meetings. We have a website for the Sheriff's Oversight project that we're working on. There'll also be a website created for the Reimagining Adult Justice. There are so many ways to get involved and to make a difference, and you're in a community where that is possible. So I want to thank you very much for having me here tonight, and look forward to the group discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for the work you are doing. It's hopeful to think about some of the work that is being done, some of the transformative work that is being done, but also of the dire need for more funding and more resources toward it. When you came in, you should have received out in the front of the church were the 8-page document of those programs, and so hopefully you have those as well. And a reminder, if you have any questions, go ahead and hold them up. And Dave, it's your turn to start bringing them on up to me. And now we would like to transition, as Wendy concluded, no real work toward transformative justice can take place without the voices of those who have been systems impacted and who know firsthand what needs done to truly transform, reimagine, and create justice in our communities. And so now we will have 3 panelists come up. Let me introduce first Berthuard Lewis. Got that? Berthuard Lewis, come on up. He is a community organizer in food justice and an Oakland native who's going to speak to us about the conditions at Santa Rita.
Can I pull it up? How y'all doing tonight? It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Berthuard Lewis, and man, only by God's grace that I'm here to be able to talk about my experience in Santa Rita Jail. When I got there, I truly was powerless and understood that my life had become unmanageable, and it was an eye-opening experience, and I hadn't been there in I don't know, about 20 years, and it was COVID, so we had to be isolated for about 2 weeks, and yeah, it was basically like being in a SHU program in Pelican Bay State Prison, where my sensors and my sensory got deprived. I didn't see no sunlight. I wasn't able to even read a book, and I had to sit with myself. I had to really sit with myself and understood first and foremost, how did I get there, right? Because my life had become unmanageable. Then the overall system, right, and the way that I was raised in the environment that I was raised in. I was fortunate enough, to go to get out and be dependent on a community where I was able to get get into organizing and have folks in the community, man, support me throughout my journey. And then I went back into my insanity and caught a case. And, that system is filled with trauma, There's no rehabilitation involved in that, what I had to experience. I'm talking about the conditions where, it's 20 people in this little slim living conditions, and, it's folks with mental health disorders up in there, it's folks who are criminals in there, it's folks who are squares in there, and it's folks who are suffering from addiction up in there. And so all of these, kind of this mixture is set off a whole bunch of emotions where folks is dealing with all of their traumas, from growing up, to put it frank, black, brown, and in these low income communities where, a lot of the stuff that we was taught wasn't, it wasn't the right thing, and what we had to unlearn. I just got my 2-minute little thing up, so I'm gonna keep it going. This system, I'm fortunate, first and foremost. I had community support, when I initially got out, and I was able to take advantage of that. I had people who cared about me, but I still found myself in situations that I put myself in. And, when we talk about, this criminal justice system, it's a system for a reason, and the system is actually doing its job. So when we talk about, how can we help and how can we, we need to come with a full, clear heart, because this is the work that's not for the weary, and you have to be pure in heart to do it. And I just, I only got 1 minute left, so I just wanted to thank y'all, and thank you for this experience as far as you guys organizing this event. You truly given folks who are formerly incarcerated hope, and that's, honoring other people's experiences, and I thank y'all for honoring mine. I wish I had a few more minutes to talk, but appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Berthuard, for your testimony and your work as a community organizer. Just thinking that Santa Rita is a place filled with trauma reminds us of what we need to do to think with compassion, to bring humanity to this place. Thank you. I'd now like to invite up John Jones, the third, another Oak Cliff native who is the Director of Reentry and Violence Prevention Programs at Building Opportunities for Self-Sufficiency. And John is going to talk to us specifically about not only his own experience, but reentry programs.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Jones III, PFN number AUV 543, California Youth Authority number 65275, and DOC number 323372. That should tell you my experience with incarceration. But it's important that we start there, because I want everybody to understand it felt exactly that. It felt personal. I always share, as a formerly incarcerated person, I have both a civic duty and a moral obligation to give back to my community. How can I do that if society deems a certain punishment to be just, meaning whatever sentence was imposed upon myself, and if I followed that and came home, why was people like myself continuously punished? I paroled in 2012, and for 18 months, I was both unsheltered and unemployed, despite being an FAA licensed airframe and power plant mechanic. Let us think about that. We talk about reentry. It don't exist if I'm not allowed to enter on the same level as each and every one of you. If you do the crime, they say do the time. But if we do the time, it's a crime to continue to punish us when we come home. And for someone like myself as a single father, it wasn't just myself being punished. I get sometimes people say, well, hey, you're a criminal, you're a thug, you don't deserve to have a job. I'm okay with that. But what about my children who never wore handcuffs? Do they deserve to be punished? But here's a beautiful thing. What can be improved in reentry services? I'm gonna be very respectful because I see timekeepers doing a great job. I'm a Jones, I talk. I normally ignore timekeepers. That's why I'm formerly incarcerated, but I'm gonna be nice tonight. The great thing is this. First of all, people like former probation chief Wendy Steele. When I found out that Wendy was gonna be here, that's why I said yes. People like Wendy is why we have made so much progress. And this is what we need to continue to do. It's not just the community, because we do our part, but what about our elected and appointed officials? We need them to represent our interests. And I would say this, the ultimate goal for me in terms of how we can improve it, because to be clear, we came a long way. And that's why I'm honored to work for an organization like BOSS, because any person who walked through any of our hubs, that's me. And I think about if someone had the power to help my life, to help me in my journey, whether it's accessing housing or employment or any key essential service that's gonna help me become a better human being, how would I feel knowing that power laid in the hands of someone who didn't care, who didn't like their job, who just simply had a bad day? But the ultimate goal here in this county that we should be focused on is this concept that once a person returns home, it should be that. What is home for you? A safe place, a place for you to think, to grow, to evolve, to elevate. There should be no shackles when that door is let loose, whether that's physically, mentally, or otherwise. Here's the last thing I want to share. What are the ways the public, the government, and faith community can engage? Let's start with the public. 1 out of 3 adults have some form of a criminal history. That means everybody in this room knows someone who's dealing with that. So we have to speak up, whether we directly impacted ourselves, like you hear me and Berthuard and Saabir is doing, or if you're a family member or a loved one of someone like us. Because sometimes we might not have the agency to do so. Our voices must be heard. Our elected and appointed officials, again, we need you to represent the values that have put the East Bay and Oakland and Alameda County on that proverbial map. It is not enough to bask ourselves in that reputation of being progressive and liberal if we're still maintaining draconian policies and mindsets. Last, and by no means certainly least, as a believer in the almighty high power, faith leaders, especially those who are from the Abrahamic faith traditions, but anyone in general, keep in mind some of the most greatest people that you have read about in your Old Testament. David, Daniel, the book of Revelations by John was written in prison. We cannot celebrate and honor women and men that have been recorded in the Holy Scripture as being formerly incarcerated, but in our day-to-day lives say people don't deserve an opportunity. We must walk and live our faith, because faith without works is dead. But remember, the obverse is true. Works without faith is also dead. What are we working toward if we don't believe in it? So thank you all so very much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much, John, for who you are and for the ways in which you are at work bringing humanity to all who are going through reentry programs. You lead by example. Our third panelist, I want to invite Saabir Lockett up, Saabir is a good friend and director of Faith Alliance for a Moral Economy, a program of East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy. Saabir, you've been in this work for a while in a number of different ways, and so we've invited you to speak in general about alternatives to incarceration, what needs done.
Thank you, everybody. I first would like to thank the organizers for this event, all the people who are participating in presence, as well as the people that are participating online. I would like to thank our former guest who spoke earlier before me, speaking truth to justice, speaking to power. My name is Saabir Lockett. I'm going to start off with the fact that I'm an ex-LA gang member. I served 21 years in prison. I went to prison when I was 19 years old. After several years of perpetrating that same type of behavior that led me to prison, I would eventually undergo a lot of self-help therapy, cognitive therapy programs, eventually get my GED, graduated several levels of college, and then I would go into law school, get my paralegal license, and fight my case. Eventually I won at the United States Supreme Court and came home 21 years later. So that's just to set the context. Because I believe titles is nothing but it just means more responsibility. You know what I'm saying? You have to first understand who the person is. So like my friend and brother John Jones spoke to, we have to first recognize that we are human. We are sons, we are daughters, we are parents, grandparents, and we have to be recognized in our dignity just to exist as a human being, and we are more than the sum total of our worst mistakes. One thing I want to talk about as well is that I want to talk about a little something different, right? Because I don't want to regurgitate the same information, but what I would say is that we have to focus on the fact of this system was created for profit. We talking about incarceration, we can't put a Band-Aid on a problem. We got to talk about the root causes. The root cause of crime and violence is poverty. Root cause of crime and violence is poverty. So we have to talk about resources, right? We have to talk about resources necessary to both address trauma-informed best practices for those who have been victimized of crime and also for those who have did crime. Because those who have did crime are also the victims of a society that created the situations and circumstances for them to suffer and therefore have to turn to crime as a means of survival. Also, I think that the most important thing, in addition to what all has been said, is that we must support our youth and everything to empower our youth with resources. We need to invest in our parks and recs and things of that nature. We also have to empower them to have a voice, you know what I mean, to hold our elected officials to a more authority. And the reason I say a more authority, because as the director of the Faith Alliance for a More Economy, I know firsthand that we're not fighting always against policy. We're fighting for the understanding that we recognize the human condition in every person, so that when we are trying to change policy, we want decision makers to live into their power, and make a moral, right decision for the people that they serve, right? Okay, 2 minutes. But I would also say that we must invest again. It's investment. We have overdue investments. Invest in reentry support services. Focus on our youth and ensure that we prioritize investment in them and involve them in city decision-making processes. Provide public health response to addictive and substance abuse and stop criminalizing folks who have mental illness and substance abuse issues. Decriminalizing and harm reduction. Provide a public health response to addictive and substance abuse problems. We need to also repeal laws that criminalize the homelessness and poverty. You know, we're locking up people for being homeless. You know, in time of COVID, think about it. How many people that lost their jobs, living in their cars, living on the streets, and they're being criminalized and persecuted and put in jail because they are homeless? These are the things that we have to talk about. We have to get to some of the root causes when we're talking about alternatives to incarceration. You can't put a Band-Aid on it. We have to deal with the problems. The problems is poverty, the lack of resources adequate enough to educate our children, adequate enough to provide the services necessary for our adults who are suffering from mental health and substance abuse issues. And then also, we have to step up and do our job. We have to step up and do our job. So again, community, how do you get involved? Get involved in our local programs. Get involved in organizations that's doing work to transform our societies. Make your voice heard. If you want to get involved and you don't want to be on the front line, philanthropy. Donate to some services that will give a job to a formerly incarcerated person who have the best answers because he's directly impacted by the situation. So employ folks who's been through the system so that they can be the avenue and mentors, they can be the voice towards the system change that we need to see. So I would just say those few things. And then the faith community, again, it is a moral obligation and responsibility to act upon our faith. And that's just what it is. I practice religion of Islam, but I galvanize the community We run a community called Economic Justice for Black Oakland, and we bring together multiple faith communities, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, Indians, and we stand together united for social justice and systems change. That's how we get involved, that's how we engage, and we hold folks accountable. Do not be scared to speak truth to power. Do not be scared to, if someone is being oppressed, stand up for what's just. And understand that it's rooted in racist policies. You know, we have white flight. You know what I mean? We have redlining. You know, all these policies throughout history has conditioned and made the systems of incarceration possible. So let's change the systems. Thank you.
Let's change the systems. So we've come to a time of Q&A, an invitation if you have a question to go ahead and write it on a piece of paper. If you're in Zoom and you want to put it in the chat, I am being fed those. I'm going to start with a question for Wendy. Question of accountability. What plans to create data dashboards are there so that the public, as well as the administration, can track the progress toward the goals? For example, 0 people with severe mental illness incarcerated in Santa Rita County. We need data for this accountability and transparency. And for the Q&A, I'm going to invite you, you're welcome to come up here, but there are microphones on each table. If you push it to turn it on, then you can use it that way as well.
Thank you very much. I'd say maybe in one word about the dashboard, Babu lawsuit, maybe that's 2 words. The jail basically is under a consent decree in relationship or related to the Babu lawsuit. And it will require that they are very closely tracking the number of individuals that have any kind of mental illness that are incarcerated, not only tracking them, but that are delivering services. I think that is going to help with the data dashboards. I'm going to talk about AB 1185 for a minute. The whole purpose of AB 1185 is oversight of sheriff, and potentially, if the board approves that, and an inspector general. And that is all about looking at data, looking at policies, and producing reports and evaluations. That's the function of those entities. And I also wouldn't just focus on the sheriff, it's focusing on other data dashboards. I know the district attorney has the daylight system that they've worked a lot on improving the capacity of the system to be able to know who, what, and when, is going through the system and what the outcomes are. Same with probation. We just basically created a new data system that produces all kinds of data relative to who's under supervision for what length, demographics, and that type. So I think the county is positioning itself to, but the big push needs to be from the community is to have these dashboards out on websites so that they're easily that you can easily access them, but you can also understand what they say. Because you can put a whole bunch of data out there, but if it's not presented in such a way that it's really easy to understand, especially to somebody that doesn't, live and breathe it every single day, then it's not useful. And so use the dashboards that are created, provide input, insist upon whatever is created, that it is producing the data. I was looking today, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyways. I was looking today for the population of the jail, and I had to ask someone where I would have to go to find that, whereas I would have expected to go right on the website and be able to see today's population is X. Well, I had to go into a COVID screen and go down and read, and so those kind of things are certainly probably not intentional, but those are the kind of adjustments, tweaks that can be made to make that data more accessible when it is available.
Thank you. The next question moves us a little bit more to the personal level, and not sure if any of you have any suggestions, but someone with a loved one who is currently incarcerated, is facing all kinds of COVID restrictions and preventions for visitation. And of course, COVID has just revealed this draconian, you can't see anyone, you can't get in, you can't get out. Any of the small ways in which we were able to communicate has been limited. Any comments over the past 2 years of how COVID has both really amplified the isolation and what can be done on that front? And Berthuard, you mentioned a little bit your own COVID experience.
Yeah, I mean, COVID has affected us all, and it's definitely affected folks that's incarcerated also. It's if a COVID case breaks out, well, then everybody is in this tight quarter space will be affected. So it's just like it affected all of us, but in there where you're isolated and you are already really stressed, where it's even hit rock bottom in your life, it can even be more kind of weigh on your head, and and folks that's already have mental health challenges are coming down from using drugs or already didn't have a good family situation are now hit with this double time, this triple time thing as far as COVID, and now we're sick and now I can't see my family, and so it wears down on your spirit, and then also it wears down on the officers that's in there too, because they're also scared and afraid, and so that kind of translates too to how they treat the folks up in there. So yeah, it's just it was and still is a dire situation.
Yeah, Saabir and then Wendy, and then all of you, please.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna be straight with everyone. I'm an abolitionist. I believe in destroying unjust systems and replacing it with just systems. Like straight to the point. So when we talk about COVID in prison, our jails in general, that's a death sentence. Is what we're talking about. We're talking about a straight death sentence. We're talking about individuals who may have did wrong in their life. They're serving their time. The same way we talk about alternatives to incarceration and how we come back into society, and then society is designed with laws to preclude us and prevent us from success, prevent us from housing, prevent us from getting stable, good jobs. That's the same thing we're talking about when someone get COVID in prison. You see what I'm saying? They didn't bring COVID to themselves. The officers brought COVID to them. And then they are forced to sit under this level of oppression, under the fear of death. That's what we're talking about for someone in prison or in jail to catch COVID. And then the fear of them dying from their family members. I was fortunate enough to organize with Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, to stand united with faith communities and communities who are fighting for the release of prisoners who had family members who have died in prison. You see what I'm saying? Because it's the understanding, the recognition that people deserve to be acknowledged, and then they deserve some other opportunity to get their freedom outside of having to sit up in a prison cell and die based upon a situation they didn't even create upon themselves. That is the problem. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to address it that way. Let's look at it for what it is, so that we can understand when people in positions of power, when we are talking about sheriffs, we talking about DAs, we talking about mayors, y'all can do something different for these people who are suffering in the families that has to hear the letters, the cries of these men and women who are suffering in prison. Thanks.
First, I just want to quickly start by thanking the beautiful, wonderful person who even asked this question. I mean, as someone that's been on the inside, it's nothing like having somebody on the outside loving you enough to show the love, to express it. And I just want to say something real quick. I'm going to say two things. I just did Instacart shopping yesterday because I do a lot of working from home and, you know, call me lazy, I don't care, it's convenient. And I was getting some eggs and they had an option and it said cage-free eggs, right? We know what this is, right? That means these eggs came from chickens that wasn't cooped up or incarcerated, locked up in a cage. We care about animals being treated inhumanely, which I don't have nothing against. But why does it stop there? For me, it don't have to be an either or. It should be a both and. And the last thing I want to say is so important as it relates to COVID, because keep in mind, we are social creatures. We're social creations. This is necessary. They even did studies on plants. You put a plant in a room with no sunlight, it will wither and die. You put a plant in a room with sunlight and water and play some good music and some nourishment, it will grow. It's the same thing with human beings. I had someone very close to me that was just in Santa Rita under these conditions, and they shared that with me what it was like for them in real time. And here's the last thing I want to say I think is so important, because a lot of times I think this piece is missing. Not everyone in Santa Rita jail is guilty. Remember, we're innocent to proving guilty. Just because you're in Santa Rita does not mean you have been convicted and or pled guilty. So we must always remember that piece as well.
And even if you happen to be in Santa Rita and be guilty, there is no reason why you should be treated inhumanely. There's no reason why you should be locked away and caged when you're trying to be held accountable for your actions.
Now, real quickly, for those who feel like, oh, when you did something wrong, you deserve it. So we got to talk about
No, I just wanted to make one comment. When we talk about thinking differently and creating different strategies, you know, detention in any kind of prison or jail is isolating. And that family connection is so important for mental health, for the family, for the children of the individual that may be in jail or in any kind of detention. And something that the federal government has done in some of their facilities is that they give 500 free minutes. Telephone is very expensive in jail. And the families already are, it's many of them, very challenged, you know, financially, and can't bear and should not have to bear that additional burden, especially with COVID. They can't even come and see their loved one. And so the progressive policy that they created was to give 500 free minutes to everyone that was in detention. And that really helped with the connection, and so many, it helped the families, helped the children, helped the individual. And for those that have to be in detention, I think that is an example of a very humane policy, is to be able to have them connect with their family without putting another economic burden on the family.
So I'm actually going to build on that, Wendy, because one of the questions talks about, Santa Rita and other jails and prisons are notorious for a culture of degradation and dehumanization. But what do you suggest? What one or two essential changes in practice could be made right now to address that? All of y'all. Whoever wants it.
Repeat that question again, that was pretty deep.
Well, so we know that jails and prisons are notoriously degrading and inhumane and depersonalizing. What one or two things do you suggest could be done to address that?
Well, like I said when I spoke earlier, I'm all about investment. Invest in the community resources necessary to create the changes that we want to see in the future. If we can provide our kids opportunities, there will be no need for our kids to go to jail. First and foremost, that's where we start at. First and foremost, let's start with the children, let's start with opportunities, let's start with our education system, let's start with our parks and recs, let's start with job opportunities, let's start with, decriminalizing education. Why do a person be broke to go to college to get opportunity? You know what I'm saying? Let's start with understanding that everyone's not going to go to college? Can we invest in technical skills in our high schools to provide opportunities for folks who can get a job, work with their hands, and make an adequate living for themselves? You know, can we start with investment? That's where it starts. And then we don't have to worry about the prison problem. You know what I'm saying? That's where I'm with it. You know what I mean? So, but then when you're dealing with prison, it's also to understand, again, can we get adequate services for folks who are incarcerated? Can we stop guards from harassing prisoners to give them an adequate opportunity at an education? You see what I'm saying? I was fortunate enough to graduate with my AA degree, a bachelor's degree, and go to law school. I had a family that loved me, that cared for me. So I was able to do these things advance, you know what I'm saying, within the conditions, you know what I'm saying, and I was in Pelican Bay State Prison at this time. You know what I'm saying? On the level 4, one step from death row. There was no programs available. Because so we start investing and understand that when we have returning citizens, before they're returning citizens, and they're inside, can we get a comprehension that they coming home? And what is it gonna look like for them to come home? We talk about wraparound services. That's the second thing. Let's really invest in wraparound services so that folks are getting the attention they need. You know, how many times we understand, what was that, AB 109 and why that was created? Because of the lack of medical care in prisons. You see what I'm saying? So then we had this whole system restructured. Could we actually just start holding people accountable? And then, like, these are the criminals that's not providing adequate health to people who are incarcerated. That's wrong with it, so.
I promise I'll be brief. First of all, shut them down, close them. Seriously, and I say it real quickly why. Incarceration is only treating the symptom. It does not treat the root cause. If I send my kids to school on a cold winter day without adequate clothing, and he gets sick, and I'm just giving him cough syrup, but every day I send him back to school in those same conditions, wondering why his health is not improving. That's because I'm attempting to treat the symptom, but not attempting to treat the main cause, a lack of adequate clothing. It's the same thing, right? And I want to say one last thing too. I mean, look it up in the 13th Amendment, whether it's the Constitution or the documentary. We're really talking about legalized chattel slavery. That's simply what we're talking about here. So if we want to feel safe, again, you have to go to root causes. What is creating the conditions that allow human beings to become reduced by the condition that they're forced to endure, sent into a worse environment called jail or prison, and then somehow sent back to the same environment that failed them to begin with, crippled with additional barriers and obstacles, and say, ha ha, how come you're not making it?
Well, I completely agree with making investment in the communities, and the communities that have been disproportionately impacted, is so important. And I also would say change the culture of our detention facilities. When I say that, it's in Norway, over in Europe, some of their prison system, the most progressive, their whole job is to return home better neighbors. You know, the punishment is you're taken away from your community, from your family. Punishment is not to be delivered in prison. And so if we refocus, which means that we have to provide training, and then hold the staff accountable, right, to basically adhere to policy, to produce positive results, to create that environment in which individuals can change their lives. But the very first thing is make the investment in communities that just haven't been invested in, and we see how that's resulted in.
Okay, so one last question, and we're down to our last 2 minutes, so I'm getting the time card too, just so you know. So we need to invest in our community. We need to invest in alternatives to incarceration. We need to invest in resources. We need to invest in more humane ways of holding people accountable. And yet so many of our community resources go to the sheriff's department. How do you see making a change so that these resources can be better invested in the community going forward?
First, get an adequate analysis of what's not working. We already know what's not working. You know what I mean? What is the rate of arrests towards crimes? I think it's a sham. It's a shame with the how many times officers actually arrest someone or how many crimes are created, and that they don't actually put anyone in jail, but yet they're getting paid to do the work. There's a particular name for that. I can't get it right now. But I'll just say, we are putting, $30 million into police? Literally. What would happen if we put 10 million in our community? Straight up. What would happen if you get individuals like myself, Regent Berthuard Lewis, John Jones III, and you invest in us individuals to run these services in these communities? What happened if us on the ground do the work, you see what I'm saying, and you invest in us, and we out talking to the community. We out here, you know what I'm saying, talking to the homeboys on the block. They got the keys where the violence is gonna happen or not. You see what I'm saying? That's the kind of communication that needs to happen. You know what I'm saying? Put that 10 million or 5 million or 1 million in the community to invest in itself. That's what we need to see different.
I'll go real quickly. I think that it starts with education because we all been conditioned and programmed to follow the cause and effect model, right? Quote unquote, crime occurs, law enforcement must respond. That model would never be successful because it's always predicated on being reactive and not proactive. So we have to be honest with that. We have to understand where our money is going. Here's the second thing, because we can focus on the sheriff here, but make no mistakes. The local government is just a microcosm of our federal government. And how many trillions of dollars have we spent taxpayer dollars on? I'm saying we, because this happens, supposed to be with our consent by voting, bombing brown and yellow countries overseas. So we have to educate ourselves. We got to get out this mindset of thinking that doing the same thing over and over and over again will bring a different result. That's all I'm going to share on that part.
I would just say what we talked a little bit about before is that program is to basically create programs so that police don't have to arrest. First, invest in education. Change also, I would raise the age of which youth were thought of a youth. We know their brain isn't fully developed, youth until 25. So why do we think magically at 18, 19, or 20 that, that they're going to exercise good judgment? So we need to look at the age in which we look at in-term individuals, adults, but then also that we need to create programs like the CARES program that basically there is an avenue. If somebody basically does create or do something that could be arrested for, instead of arresting them, get them help, get them treatment. And that's what basically creating a humane, just system looks like, is getting help rather than trying to punish.
Thank you all. Thank you all. I can't begin to address all the questions here, but I do want to note that one person wanted to mention as alternatives to incarceration that one of the programs that you didn't yet mention, Wendy, but that is significant is the ceasefire program. And because that takes place here at Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church, I want to give it a shout out. So we wanted to give each of you an opportunity for closing remarks. It can be something you haven't gotten to yet. It can be something you want to say in response to something else. But what do you want to leave the community with, each of you, as we go home and continue chewing on all this great content? What do you want to really stick out in our heads as we look as a community toward investing in alternatives to incarceration? Whoever wants to start first.
Hello?
You?
I would just like to leave the community with that. I think, speaking from personal experience, that I sold myself short for a long time. And I feel like I was always more powerful, than I gave myself credit for. And I was always more powerful than I gave myself credit for. And all of you out there is more powerful than you think. And just one person out there with a pure heart that has a fire that can inspire, you guys can do a lot, and you've probably already done. And I just want to challenge you, because I know we're all in here for a reason. We're all in here because we care, you know? We all in here because it's something that's within us that wants to give, you know, that wants to inspire, you know? Every single individual in here has something to give and something to inspire. And I feel like, you know, that spark that you guys feel, you can manifest that into something that can be historic. And so I just challenge you, you know, to take that spark and cultivate that, right? And make a powerful change in the way that you see fit, in a way that inspires you, in a way that, you know, that wakes you up and makes you come alive. Thank you.
For me, I'm gonna say all violence is state violence. Let's get an understanding about that. Violence don't always come in a frame that someone physically harms someone or mentally oppresses someone. Violence is also policies that create the conditions necessary for folks to live in poverty, and then therefore have to make the decisions that the only way I can make it is to do crime. I would also like folks to understand that it takes a collective to make change. You know, it's not a competition, it's a collaboration. You know, I believe Chairman Fred Hampton has said, you don't fight racism with racism, you fight it with love. So how do we love each other and care enough about each other that we are seeing that it's gonna take every individual in our society to come together. It's gonna take all the different elements that make society run, whether it's running corrupted or smoothly, whatever it may be. It's gonna take all the systems, all the people, you know, because the people run the systems. So if the people can change, and then, you know, we can get progressive leadership that actually stand united with the people's concerns, then we can make a difference if we can collaborate with one another.
For me, I hope each and every person in this room and who's listening take away two things. First of all, we are human. And what I mean by that, it's interesting, being on the inside where you get guys, you be like, oh man, this guy, he did such and such. You think he's this tough guy. But something happens when you're spending time in a two-person cell. After some time go by, people start opening up. Then you start seeing that inner wounded child. And then you begin to look at people differently. Like, wait a minute, you're not some cold-blooded killer. You somebody who started off as a little boy, 4 years old, waiting for your daddy to come pick you up, and you in that window faithfully, and your dad don't come get you. You begin to humanize the issues. And I think that's what we really need to do. We need to focus on the fact that we're talking about human beings, not just numbers, not using dehumanizing language. Two more things. First one, I define community as common unity. We're set up to focus on the things that supposedly divide us. But at the end of the day, if you think about what your own self-interests are, right? You want to make sure you and your loved ones are housed, that they're adequately clothed and properly fed. That should be extended to every single human being regardless. You fill in the blank on what comes after regardless. Here's the last thing I live by. Transformation can only occur from close proximity. Let me say that again. Transformation can only occur through close proximity. It doesn't matter what your ideology is, what your religious beliefs are, your socioeconomic status. It really doesn't matter. What matters is once we come together and we converse and dialogue, we're in a position to better understand how we think about some of these issues, and most importantly, how we can get to a place of consensus of truly creating what I call and what would constitute true public safety. Because that word, as I wrap up, is safety for the public, not throwing someone in jail. So thank you all.
I would probably say one word: vote. There are elections that are coming up. I think there's Board of Supervisor elections, there's the district attorney's election that will be coming up. I think DA O'Malley is retiring. Turn your energy and interest into action. Get involved. There's so many, we've talked about so many different ways that you can get involved. You know, my passion has kept me going for 40 years. Find out what your passion is, connect into that, invest in it, and vote.
And on that note, I want to call your attention to the program that listed all the partner organizations. On the very back page, there is a call to action and resources. In fact, this is full of partner orgs so that you can learn more about what's happening. But some of the campaigns that are going on in each of these communities. What does it take for Oakland to invest in a moral budget, particularly as it's preparing for its mid-cycle budget process? What does sheriff oversight look like? Why your vote matters in the race for Alameda County District Attorney and Sheriff. Lots of events going on, so here is a way for you to figure out what matches your interests, your time, your resources, how you can get involved. I do thank you for showing up tonight, and I do want to remind you that together, between in-person and Zoom and those who registered, we are 31 organizations strong who are all working for alternatives to incarceration. There are programs, there are people doing the work, but it's going to take all of us. Let's give a big hand to our speakers. And for those of you, especially if you're in front, I invite you to just turn and give a wave to the camera so we can feel connected to our Zoom audience. It's great to be in community together as we address these difficult, these hard, but these issues that if we address, we can find some hope in the work we do together. And finally, Saabir, you want to come up here or you want to use that?
I can stand right here.
Okay, but use the mic.
Yeah,
Okay, we've invited Saabir Lockett to give us a closing prayer this evening.
Well, I'm going to do a closing prayer, and then in the spirit of, just all that has occurred tonight, in the spirit of humanity. You're looking at 3 individuals who society threw away, who are today standing here speaking about what system change look like, what alternatives to incarcerations look like. And that was possible by love of family members, care of family members. That was possible by organizations in place that gave us opportunities, a second chance at a first-class life. So I just want to just name that piece, because we all do community work and very powerful work. All the titles we serve, people don't even understand. You know what I'm saying? I'm a mayor-appointed commissioner of the city of Oakland. You know what I'm saying? Ensuring job opportunities, compliance and oversight commissions for job, workforce development training. You know what I'm saying? I sit on boards, you know what I'm saying, for organizations that's doing work, digital divide gaps for folks who are formerly incarcerated. We hold multiple titles, but it was important to just say we are formerly incarcerated. We are returned citizens, and we have a voice in this matter. And with that, I'm going to say we sit today at an intersection of hope, this intersection of hope and love, an intersection of care and compassion. We sit here today at an intersection of justice against oppression. So let us embody that spirit as I'm going to lead a prayer. This prayer, I'll start it in Arabic, then I'll also say it in English. I practice the religion of Islam, and I also believe in the universal nature that we all following our God, in whatever name, color, tradition that we choose. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. And that is to say, all praise and all glory be to the Most High. All praise and glory be to the Most High, who is the most compassionate, for all of creation, and who is the most merciful, and is the most merciful for those exclusively that turn to him. All praise and glory be to the Most High, who is Lord of all things that exist, all systems, all understandings, all things, all sciences that create this world to what it is. And all praise and glory be to the Most High, who is the master of the day of judgment, the Yawmiddin, master of the day of judgment, where we all have to be resurrected and held accountable for the things that we did and the things that we didn't do, the ways in which we have lived our lives and the ways in which we didn't live our lives, the ways in which we have held authority and the ways in which we abuse authority. All praise be to the Most High, who we turn to for guidance, for substance, for help, for direction. All praise be to the Most High, who we seek his understanding and his compassion. And we pray that we are on the path of those who are guided and not on the path of those who have went astray. In his many names, I pray and seek his glory. Amen. Ashe. Shalom. Blessed be.
Go in peace.